The day Simone Biles chose herself, the world learned what true strength means. It was supposed to be just another moment of triumph. One more flawless performance in a career built on perfection. Cameras flashed, the crowd roared, and billions around the world prepared to witness the impossible once again. But instead of leaping into the air, Simone stood still. Her hands trembled slightly, her chest rose and fell as she fought to breathe through the noise that no one else could hear that day. In Tokyo, she made a choice that echoed far beyond the Olympic arena. She stepped back. She refused to perform. And for a moment that felt eternal, silence replaced applause. People didn't understand how could the strongest woman in the world walk away at the height of her power. But Simone knew something the world didn't. Sometimes, the bravest act is not to keep going, but to stop. Behind that decision lay years of invisible weight. Years of pushing through pain because that's what champions are taught to do. Years of hiding fear behind smiles, of trading tears for medals. She had always been the one who never failed, who carried a nation's expectations on her small but powerful shoulders. Yet now, she was choosing something greater than gold. Her peace, her mind, her life. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happened. For the first time, millions saw not an athlete, but a human being, one who had sacrificed everything for perfection and was finally saying, "Enough." It was a moment that would divide opinions, ignite debates, and change how the world viewed strength itself. Because Simone Biles wasn't just stepping away from the mat, she was stepping into herself. Her story is not one of defeat, but awakening, the awakening of a woman who refused to be defined by what she could do and chose to be remembered for who she was. If you enjoy stories that inspire, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Now, let's go back to where it all began, long before the medals, before the fame, before the world even knew her name. Before the balance beam, there was no floor beneath her feet. Before she learned to fly, Simone Biles first had to learn to stand on uncertain ground. She was born in Columbus, Ohio, in 1997, into a world that offered little stability. Her mother, battling addiction, loved her children deeply but couldn't provide what they needed most: consistency, safety, care. Her father drifted away before she ever learned his voice. The Biles children were left to navigate the spaces between absence and survival, between love and neglect. By the time Simone was 3, she and her siblings were placed in foster care. It was not a place for dreams, just temporary rooms filled with unfamiliar faces and whispered prayers that someone somewhere would come. Nights were long, the air heavy with uncertainty. Sometimes, Simone would press her tiny hands against the window, watching the streetlights fade as if trying to hold on to something stable in a world that kept moving. And yet, even in those dark years, something extraordinary began to shine through. There was a spark in her, a rhythm that refused to be broken. She'd flip off furniture, balance on rails, and leap from beds as if the laws of gravity didn't apply to her. The other children laughed, calling her the flying girl. It was as though her soul already knew she was meant to rise. Then, one day, a letter came. Her grandparents, Nellie and Ronald Biles, had made a decision that would rewrite her story. They would bring Simone and her sister Adria home. Suddenly, the world stopped spinning. Stability found her at last. Moving in with her grandparents in Texas, Simone discovered what safety felt like. Her grandmother's warm laugh filled the kitchen, and her grandfather's steady voice became the soundtrack of her new life. For the first time, she slept without fear. She ate without worry, and when she fell, someone was there to help her back up. Love became her foundation, the first solid floor she had ever known. But even in this newfound calm, that restless spark remained. The girl who once leaped to escape now began to leap to express. The flips that once defied sadness began to chase joy. In the stillness of her new home, she didn't just find peace, she found possibility. No one could have imagined that this little girl, who once had nothing, would soon hold the entire world in awe. Her journey was only beginning. The balance beam awaited, not as a test of her strength, but as a mirror of everything she had already survived. It began with a school trip that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Simone was 6 years old when her class visited a local gymnastics center. The smell of chalk filled the air, and the rhythmic sound of bodies hitting mats echoed like thunder. She sat quietly at first, wide-eyed, watching other children tumble through the air as if gravity had been replaced by faith. Then, curiosity turned into something deeper: recognition. Without asking permission, she joined in, copying their movements, mimicking flips with uncanny precision. The coaches stopped and stared. In a single afternoon, they saw what most spend a lifetime searching for: raw, fearless talent. When Simone returned home that day, her grandmother received a note from the gym. "She has something special," it read. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was prophecy. Soon training became part of her daily life. By age 8, her schedule was stricter than most adults. School in the morning, gym in the afternoon, homework between car rides. While other children played, Simone learned to fall, to fail, and to rise again. The repetition was endless. Her hands blistered, her muscles screamed, her small frame often trembled under the weight of expectation. But when she flew, everything else disappeared. Pain became poetry. Her coaches quickly realized she was unlike anyone they had ever trained. Her strength was explosive, her awareness otherworldly. She moved as if her body understood physics differently, every twist, every flip, every landing rewritten in her own language. In gymnastics, where perfection is measured in tenths, Simone aimed for infinity. But her greatest asset wasn't her power, it was her joy. Even when her body was pushed to exhaustion, she smiled not to perform, but because the air itself made her feel alive. Her laughter echoed across the gym like a promise of greatness waiting to unfold. At home, her grandparents watched in awe. Ronald would sit quietly in the stands, his proud eyes following her every move, while Nellie reminded her to stay humble, to pray, to keep her heart as grounded as her feet after every landing. They weren't just raising an athlete, they were raising a soul strong enough to carry history. As competitions began, medals followed, first local, then national. But beyond the trophies, Simone carried something invisible yet powerful: gratitude. She knew where she had come from, and that every leap was a thank you to the people who believed in her before the world did. And though she didn't know it yet, every flight was preparing her for something much bigger than victory. It was preparing her to redefine what it means to be strong, not only in body, but in spirit. By the time Simone Biles was 17, her name had already become a synonym for perfection. She didn't just win, she transformed every competition she entered. The world watched, mesmerized, as she spun through the air higher, faster, stronger than anyone else had ever dared. Judges rewrote scoring systems because of her. Commentators ran out of superlatives. Her routines looked like they had been choreographed by gravity, itself giving up. But behind that golden glow was a storm that no one could see. Success had a cost, and it was heavier than the medals that hung around her neck. The discipline that once brought her joy began to devour her peace. Every day she woke before dawn, muscles aching, mind racing. Every move had to be flawless, every expression perfect, every landing exact. The pressure to maintain perfection wasn't just physical, it became spiritual, psychological, existential. She wasn't allowed to be human. She had become a symbol, and symbols are not allowed to break. Reporters chased her. Brands demanded her time, and strangers expected miracles on command. The world saw her smile, but they didn't see the exhaustion hidden behind it. The tears shed in locker rooms, the panic before performances, the aching loneliness of being the best. In a sport where a single misstep could end everything, Simone carried not just her own dreams, but those of a nation. Then came another shadow, one that would forever alter her relationship with gymnastics. When the truth about the widespread abuse within her sport surfaced, Simone found herself not only a victim, but a survivor standing in front of cameras with the courage to speak the truth. Her voice shook, but it didn't falter. She wasn't just testifying, she was detonating a system built on silence. The applause that followed was different this time. It wasn't for a gold medal or a new skill. It was for her humanity. For the first time, the world began to understand that strength is not the absence of pain. It's the decision to confront it. But the scars didn't vanish. The trauma lingered beneath her brilliance, haunting the edges of her routines. She kept smiling, kept winning, kept performing. Every gold medal felt a little heavier, every victory a little emptier. Yet through it all, she continued to give. She continued to inspire. She continued to lead. Because that's what champions do. They keep showing up, even when their hearts beg for rest. The world saw the medals. Simone felt the weight. The air inside the Tokyo arena was electric, the kind that hums before a thunderstorm. Simone Biles stood at the edge of the mat, her hands covered in chalk, the weight of 5 Olympic medals behind her, and the expectation of billions before her. Cameras zoomed in. Commentators whispered about history in the making. This was supposed to be the moment when she would become untouchable, the greatest gymnast of all time. But something was wrong. During warm-ups, her body, that perfect machine that had never failed her, suddenly betrayed her. She spun mid-air, and for a split second, she didn't know where she was. Up felt like down. The ground became a blur. Her body twisted, but her mind disconnected. Gymnasts call it the twisties. To outsiders, it's just a mistake. But for those who know, it's terror, the sudden loss of spatial awareness that can end a career or a life in a heartbeat. When Simone landed, she didn't smile. She walked away quietly, head bowed, fighting tears. The world didn't understand what had happened, only that something had changed. Hours later, she made a decision that would echo across the world. She withdrew from the competition, not because she couldn't perform, but because she refused to risk her body or her soul to meet others' expectations. In that moment, she did what few athletes ever dared to do. She put herself first. The criticism was immediate and brutal. Some called her weak. Others said she had failed her country. But amid the noise, a different voice emerged, her own, for the first time in her career. Simone Biles said no to the pressure, no to the pain, no to the pain, no to the idea that worth is measured by performance. And that no became one of the most powerful statements in sports history. Her decision didn't end her legend. It redefined it, because walking away was not an act of surrender. It was an act of survival. When she stood before the cameras later that day, her voice calm and clear, she said, "We're human too." And with those 3 words, she changed everything. The world erupted. Headlines exploded across every screen. Some praised her bravery. Others accused her of betraying the image of the invincible athlete. But Simone didn't respond. She stayed silent. The same woman who once commanded arenas now chose quiet, not as retreat, but as healing. In that stillness, she began to breathe again. Days turned into weeks. The cameras faded, the applause quieted, and for the first time since childhood, Simone had time to feel. She realized how long she had lived inside pressure, how she had mistaken performance for purpose. Therapy sessions replaced training. Long walks replaced interviews, and slowly, she began to understand that her worth had never depended on the color of her medals, but on the light inside her. Her teammates and millions of strangers sent messages of love and gratitude. Other athletes, inspired by her decision, began to speak openly about mental health, something long buried under the myth of toughness. Simone had done what no medal ever could. She gave permission for humanity to exist inside. Greatness, but the healing wasn't easy. Some nights, the silence was louder than the crowd. She'd sit on her bed, medals glinting faintly in the corner, wondering who she was without them. The girl who once flipped to escape was now learning to be still to survive. It was uncomfortable, even painful. Yet in that discomfort, something beautiful began to form, a new version of strength. Her courage had always been physical. Now, it became emotional. Her victories had always been public. Now, they became deeply personal. She journaled every day, fears, gratitude, small joys. She reconnected with family, rediscovered her laugh, began to move her body again, not for scores, but for freedom. Step by step, she rebuilt the bridge between her body and mind. The same discipline that once demanded perfection was now teaching her compassion. The same focus that once created pressure now brought peace. And in that gentle rebirth, Simone Biles, the woman the world had labeled superhuman, finally allowed herself to be something infinitely more powerful, human. When Simone returned to the gym, the air felt different. Gone were the echoes of expectation, the invisible eyes that once weighed every movement. The mats smelled the same. The chalk dust still floated like snow. But she was no longer the same girl who once trained here. This time, she moved without pressure. This time, she was free. At first, it wasn't about competing again. It was about rediscovering joy, the pure love of movement, the rhythm of her own heartbeat against the quiet hum of the gym. But soon, something inside her began to stir. Not the hunger to prove anything, but the curiosity to see what was still possible. What happens when you return not because you have to, but because you want to? So she trained differently. She listened to her body, honored her limits, respected her boundaries. Her coaches noticed a new kind of grace in her, one that couldn't be taught. It wasn't the perfection of the past. It was wisdom, balance.com. She had learned that true mastery doesn't come from control, but from harmony. In 2023, she stepped back into competition. The crowd erupted the moment her name was announced. And when she took off down the runway for her first vault, it felt like time folded. The little girl who once leaped from furniture now soared higher than ever, carrying every version of herself within that moment. She landed with precision, strength, and peace. The arena roared, and tears filled her eyes. She had done it not to silence critics or reclaim a title, but to remind herself of who she was, not a symbol, not a product. Not an expectation, but a woman who had learned to rise again on her own terms, and that was the greatest victory of all. Simone. Biles no longer competed to prove she was extraordinary. She competed to celebrate that she was enough. Her story, once about medals, had become a testament to what it means to reclaim one's humanity, to choose self-love over approval, and purpose over perfection. The crowd saw a champion. Simone felt peace. Strength is not the absence of struggle, it's the decision to rise, again and again, even when no one is watching. Simone. Biles taught the world that the most powerful act of courage is not standing on the podium, it's standing for yourself. Her journey reminds us that success without peace is just noise, and that no achievement can replace the quiet beauty of knowing who you truly are. She proved that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's sacred. Because when one woman chooses to honor her truth, she gives permission for millions of others to do the same. So the next time you doubt your strength, remember Simone, the girl who once had no floor and learned to fly. The woman who paused at the top of the world to protect her soul. The human being who turned vulnerability into victory. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget, every like, comment, and subscription helps the algorithm share more stories that inspire. Thank you for supporting this channel, because when we share stories like this, we remind the world what real strength looks like: compassion, courage, and the freedom to choose yourself.